Mr. Nader. My mom's a big fan of yours. She's in Philadelphia, and she's 74 years old. And I also voted for you in the last election. So I'm a member of the Progressive Party, but not yet. My question is a basic political process question, and it came to mind when the health care bill passed, and I've been asking people, maybe I've been asking the wrong people, why is it that when a bill is proposed and goes through Congress that thousands of people can add on their interest? So you have a document of 2,000 pages which nobody comprehends. How come there isn't a reform of that process where a bill is, you have one item or, one page on a bill, everyone votes on that, and there's none of this, hidden agenda stuff? I mean, can't there be a reform of that process?
That's right. Well, first of all, the reason why there's so many pages are many. One is a lot of commercial interests want waivers, exemptions, all kinds of ambiguities so they can work the loopholes. If they lose the battle on the bill, it gets into law, they can still work the loopholes. The tax code is like that. The tax code is like, oh yeah. The second reason is that you want to make sure it's tamper-proof from these corporate lawyers. And if you make sure it's tamper-proof, it gets into more detail to sort of plug the potential holes that they can poke into it. And third is they don't like to break it up. Like a health bill, you could have 10 shorter pieces of legislation. And they don't like to do that because Congress, first of all, can't walk and chew gum at the same time. I mean, they're lucky if they can get it up for one vote and overcome all this stuff. So they don't like to do that anymore. For instance, the subsidy to cover some 30 million more Americans under the health bill that Obama just signed this March doesn't go into effect, the coverage doesn't go into effect until 2014. But getting the revenue, in terms of the various taxes, starts right away. Now, 2014, that means 180,000 Americans will die, 45,000 a year. So they're trying to do revenue now, coverage then. It gets very complicated. The other thing is, the longer it is, often the harder it is to enforce it. Because the more complicated it is, the more difficult it is to enforce it. Now, there's a professor of law at the University of Michigan. He's mathematically inclined too, and he's a linguist. He knows how to write legislation very, very precisely and very clearly. But they don't listen to him. I mean, he's studied it for 40, 50 years. So you're on to something, but even my answer isn't simple. That's the problem. My main problem is it's very ambiguous, it's hard to figure out, and it's a field day for lawyers to block implementation and enforcement, because they get a lot of waivers and exemptions, this and that. Yes.
Hi, Mr. Nader. Welcome to Portland. There seems to be a contradiction in what you're saying. On the one hand, you're sort of invoking Rosa Parks and grassroots movements, and I'm sure you've heard this question. But, and on the other hand, you're writing a book that where the storyline is basically the super rich, Warren Buffett and his groups are savings. I mean, how does...
Okay, let me clarify that. Warren Buffett last year went and met with Democratic senators demanding that they raise taxes on wealthy people like him because he pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. The Democratic senators looked at him as if he was a visitor from Mars, and a few were so horrified that they might take on these corporations under his nudging that they backed away from him like he had drug-resistant tuberculosis. He's the one who helped fight with William Gates Sr. to preserve the estate tax, which applies to the 2% of the wealthiest estate. Ted Turner gave $1 billion to the UN. He's a major environmentalist around the world and is a peace advocate. So, you see, I picked him very carefully in that way. So, 99%, you're right, of the super rich. They're self-indulgent, they don't want to change things, they got the world where they like it. But there's a tiny percentage, is all we need. And the abolition movement against slavery was funded by some rich, proper Bostonians in the pre-Civil War. And the Civil Rights Movement in the 50s and 60s got millions of dollars from rich families, like the Stern family in New Orleans and the Curry family in Virginia. So there's precedent. And so what we're trying to do is to take some of the philanthropy of the super rich and move it from charity to justice, where they take on power. And I know enough of these people to know that they're disgusted as we are. And it's very few of them, to be sure, but you don't need many. But they need education. They don't know how to do it any more than we do. But what I'm saying is justice needs money, it needs resources, it needs organizers, it needs someone to pay the rent, it needs someone to pay the transportation, it needs someone to pay the litigation, it needs somebody to mobilize, you know, it needs money. And the reason why we have environmental groups is in part because some rich people started some environmental groups. NRDC, Environmental Defense Fund, and so on. So it's all explained there. I was very aware of your issue that you raised, and they even discuss it. And they knew they couldn't do it themselves, but they give the backing, motivate, morale, get people on the media, clean elections party, take on the big boys. It's very realistic. And we, even in local, every city like Portland and so on, they have very rich people. Sometimes they're bored silly with their lives after retirement. But they see what's going on the way we do. And and so most of them don't care. All you need is a few. As I say, I outlined earlier today how George Soros, who's in the book, came out against the Iraq War again and again in the 6 months before, while Bush and Cheney were beating the drums of lies, falsehood, and deception, and while the mass media was rolling over and the Democrats were rolling over. And he put $150 million bucks, and he makes about $2 to $3 billion a year, every year. He's very brilliant as a financier. He knows how to play the exchange rates and all. And he put $150 million behind the 300 ex-generals, admirals, national security people, and diplomats who were retired, who spoke out against the war, against Bush and Cheney, including the two chief assistants to his father, Jim Baker and Brent Scowcroft, on security matters. And these were generals and admirals under Republican Democrat administration, retired with contacts in the Pentagon, State Department. They all wrote op-eds or they gave interviews, and then they didn't get a second meeting or a third meeting. And he put $150 million, putting them on the media again and again, blasting away at Bush and Cheney, giving the backbone to Congress, having congressional hearings. We wouldn't have had the Iraq War. He didn't think of it. And I called him up at the time, he didn't return my call. But just imagine, how much is $150 million for him when he went out on a limb again and again and was crucified by the Wall Street Journal and so on against the war? Because he came from Hungary, he knew fascism and communism. You see what I mean? And the same is true for tax reform. Buffett wants to completely change the tax system. He thinks it's unfair and has perverse incentives. Well, he puts $1 billion organizing every congressional district, you get tax reform. $1 billion or 500 million, you get single payer. I mean, we're talking about people who are worth 5, 10, 15, $20 billion. And if they get together with their friends, it's even less of a burden. We've got to start thinking that way. We really have to start thinking that way. We just don't have the time, decade after decade, to try to collect with a tin cup. Doesn't get us